Hey, TCC family. Coach Courtney and Coach Tyler here with you to go over swimming breaststroke 101, just some of the basics. So again, I just like to start this process off by getting to know Coach Courtney a little bit more and about her swim experience. So Coach Courtney, with you learning breaststroke, what was one of the toughest parts of it to learn, and what tips do you have for swimmers who struggle with the same thing?
Well, I think for me, breaststroke was never really a main stroke for me. Again, I did it in the IM. But for the most part, I didn't, as an athlete, really understand how breaststroke worked. With freestyle, butterfly, backstroke, like you have, kind of a constant kicking and pulling rhythm to your stroke, and breaststroke is so different from that I didn't quite understand the mechanics of how breaststroke worked, and really taking advantage of the glide portion at the end of the stroke. And I feel like with some of our athletes, that's something that they struggle with too, is, being in such a rush to go fast. For breaststroke, it's kind of a frustrating stroke, because it's like, it seems like the harder you try, the more your stroke falls apart. So the thing for me was learning how to be patient within the stroke and keep your stroke technique and your rhythm together to be able to, execute the stroke properly and be able to get the benefit of, the glide and the timing of the stroke. So I think for me, like I tried to force it, is really, what it comes down to is, I tried to basically muscle my way through it. And with breaststroke, you just can't do that.
Awesome. So you talked about being patient, gliding. So some of that takes us into the next part, which is body position. So as a swimmer, as a coach, what are some of the common errors that you see in the body position of breaststroke?
Well, I think, there's a ton of stuff that goes haywire in breaststroke. But a lot of it's head position, swimming with your face up. We see a lot of that. On the pole portion of it, you got people kind of like this dude in the middle here. I'm not entirely sure what phase of the stroke he's in, if he's on the recovery or if he's pulling back, but, getting those elbows down is not the best position to be in. Once you're pulling, you want to, try to keep a high elbow on the pull portion of your stroke. So, you know, really with breaststroke, like the slide is saying here, is trying to spend as little time as possible with your hips down. When you lift up to catch your breath, when you're pulling your body over the surface of the water and your hips drop while you're pulling your feet up, you want to spend as little time there as possible, because that's creating drag and creating resistance. So, you want to really kind of be able to tuck your hips in. And then once you hit that kick, be able to pop your hips back up to the surface and level yourself back out. And I feel like a lot of our swimmers kind of miss that. They kind of stay in that, high shoulder, low hip kind of breaststroke.
I like to think of it as a pogo stick through the water.
Yeah, just bouncing up and down for sure. Not really getting that long extension back to their original streamline.
Oh yeah, I agree. I see that all the time, and it's a lot of drag, a lot of resistance, and really
No, your distance per stroke is trashed.
Yep. Awesome. And so when we move on to the kick, so obviously the breaststroke kick is quite different than a lot of the other strokes. Is there, since we're not in the pool right now, is there anything that our swimmers can do at home to help develop this breaststroke kick, or somewhat get the motion of the kick?
Yeah, I mean, there's with all the strokes, there's definitely stuff to be done, even though you're not in the water. And I think the best thing our swimmers can be doing right now is stretching, to be honest. Increasing flexibility, increasing range of motion, and that's all going to transfer to the pool once we do get back in. Especially for breaststroke kick, you need that range of motion within the hip for your legs to be able to fall out towards the side. Most kids struggle with being able to get their feet to go from here out here and be able to push back like that. So you got to have a lot more range of motion inside the hip to be able to get your feet outside of your hip line. It's like looking at my shoulders right now. In order for me to rotate like that, even just with my arms, that's difficult to do that, being able to bring your elbows in and let my hands go out to the side. Typically our bodies are not really, they don't want to do that. So you got to kind of ease into that and be able to, little by little, create some space for your legs to be able to go and get that motion. So really increasing any sort of flexibility, range of motion, all that stuff is going to be, critical when we get back in. So.
And I just remember when I was in the pool and you were helping me with my breaststroke, to get my feet in the correct position, I really felt it in my hips.
Yeah. Well, you feel it in your hips, your lower back, all that stuff. So it's not just your legs. It's not just your knees and your ankles and all that stuff. It's really, you start feeling it in your lower back, that affects your core. So even just having a weak core is going to, kind of goober you up there.
So what would you say is probably a top stretch for loosening up the hips for breaststroke kick?
It's actually interesting. Mercer and I kind of had a little bit of this conversation yesterday during the dry land. But I would say any of the, any of the reptile stretches. So you got your lizard, you got your dragon, frog is going to be really good for your groin. You can look all that stuff up on YouTube on how to do all that stuff. But, pigeon's going to be good for getting, kind of that outside butt stretch that, you kind of need there. So really any of that is going to be like I said, any of the reptile stretches are really going to help kind of increase that spot. But I mean, even kind of looking at the slide here again, this gentleman here, just laying on your belly and bringing your feet up and just letting your feet fall out to the sides and just getting comfortable there is going to be a decent enough stretch. You don't necessarily want to push or have somebody, a parent or sibling, push on your legs, but just be able to let your feet fall out to the side and just have gravity just naturally kind of pull them to where you can kind of work on that. You don't want somebody helping you with that and pushing on your legs and, get injured. But yeah, just a gentle stretch like that's going to help a lot.
Awesome. Great advice. So again, all those exercises that Coach Courtney named off, those stretches, look them up, and it's something that you can do at home. Now, one thing, so we're talking about the kick and having the feet outside or out past the hips. So sometimes when we're at the pool deck, I notice some swimmers, they keep their feet in and their knees go out wide. So why is that not an effective kick?
Well, you're not really pushing water at that point. You're actually creating more drag by bringing your knees out wider. You're bringing your knee higher up towards your shoulder, and that creates kind of an L shape with your body, kind of like that. Say, this is my head here, and these are my knees down here. You're pushing water with all that. With breaststroke, you want to be able to maintain as much of a straight body line as you can from the shoulder all the way down towards your knees. So it really turns into a completely different movement at that point when you're bringing your knees, or when you're bringing your feet up and you're bringing your knees out to the side. You're really pushing your knees down towards the bottom of the pool. Whereas when you bring your heels up towards your bottom, that keeps the top of keeps your thighs in line with the rest of your body. They're going to come forward a little bit, but they're not going to create that L shape as much, and it'll be easier to get back out of that position once you start your kick back.
So would you say that this second picture with the where it says less frontal drag, is that a pretty good amount to bring the knees forward, more or less?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's no way to bring your legs up towards the rest of your body without your leg kicking forward a little bit. But you want like the arrow points, you can see the water flowing off the front of her body past her knees. Whereas if, her knees were coming up higher than they are, that flow of that arrow would go straight into the top of her thigh and, decrease the amount of distance per stroke that she's able to get. It's like slamming on the brakes there.
Right. Well, like an airplane, when they brake and they have the flaps go up, it's all that resistance. Awesome. Very, very good information. So let's go ahead and move on to the catch, pull, and recovery. So Courtney, in your opinion, what are some of the key elements of the catch, the pull, and the recovery in breaststroke?
Well, like I was saying earlier, with that other picture, the part of your breaststroke on the pull, is keeping that high elbow, after you've gone from here and you've gotten your catch here, you want to be able to get a nice high elbow, and you want to be able to kind of emulate almost what butterfly looks like underneath. If you took a snapshot like this one down here, that photo on the bottom, looking at a still photo, you can't really tell if she's swimming fly or breast, and that's kind of where you want to get to by, getting that, keeping that high elbow catch and being able to really pull through that once you get through there, getting your elbows in and, flowing into the extension. The other thing I see a lot of with our kids is, kind of this recovery situation going on like that. And then once they get into the extension, their elbows are now on the bottom. Okay, so then when they go in to get their next stroke, think about it, we don't streamline like in this position. Typically we streamline there. Yep. So it makes sense on the recovery, to be able to push through and get into a full, streamline. You're not going to get all the way to a full streamline, but be able to get to a loose streamline. And, when you hit that recovery and you got your hands technically upside down, you get to here, your elbows are on the bottom. And then from there, to start your next stroke, you now have to turn your hands all the way over just to start your out sweep. Right. And that, again, all that stuff takes up time to do that. And, all that time adds up. If you're doing that on every single stroke that you take, you're adding time that doesn't really need to be thrown into the swim there. So, I think that's, something to be said for all of the events is like, cut out all the, incidental movement that you don't really need. If it's not helping you go forward, get rid of it.
Right. If it doesn't serve you, just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it's creating dead spots in your race, if it's creating any sort of, thing that's just killing time, get rid of it. Don't need it.
So if looking at this arena character, would you say he does a good job of keeping the high elbows on the catch?
Yeah, the high elbows on the catch looks pretty good. I'd say the one thing that kind of trips me out on this dude, other than the just glaring hesitation that he's got in his breath, but to me it looks like he pulls a little too far back. He's pulling all the way back to his really underneath his rib cage, and that's creating that dead spot in his breath. If he could probably cut out about half of his stroke there, and be able to keep a much more aggressive tempo going forward.
So, and that's something I see on the pool deck a lot with, especially our younger or more novice swimmers, is falling too far back.
Yeah.
And like you said, it then creates that dead spot, that inefficiency, which then allows for a slower stroke.
Well, and I mean, again, this isn't a real dude, uh, but the longer he spends in that breath, you can see it on the way back down. He's, what goes up must come down. So the longer he spends in that breath, the deeper he's going to end up in his recovery underneath the water. And while you want to get you know underneath the water, you also don't want to be, if this was a real dude, I mean, he's a good foot and a half underneath underneath the water there, and that's again killing time. This dude's on pace for about a mile breaststroke. So
Uh, all right. So now we're gonna put all this together. So we discussed body position, the kick, the catch, the pull, the recovery, and just some of the common struggles, errors, some things to think about to move forward and correct those. So we are actually going to watch a video of Adam Peaty swim breaststroke. So he's the first person in swimming history to go 56 seconds in the 100-meter breaststroke. And that's 100 meters.
yeah, it's a long course.
So, yeah, this is long course, not 100 yards. So think about that for all you breaststrokers. So just pay attention to, and he's gonna swim this section 3 different times in 3 different speeds. So if you didn't see something the first time, you can watch it again and again. But just pay attention to the glide. Is he finishing his kick before he takes his next pull? Does he squeeze his feet together? Does he keep his knees close together, or is he kicking really, really wide? How wide does he sweep his hands out? Just everything that you see here. Just kind of notice and see if that's something that you're doing, that you think you're doing, maybe you're not, and just see if there's something that you can learn from it. All right, so here we go. And actually, since there's no audio on this, Courtney, if something pops into mind, something that you notice right away, if you'll just go over it with our viewers.
Well, I mean, watching Petey's fantastic. One of the things that people always see with Adam Peaty is just how aggressive his tempo is, and he's one of the athletes that's very difficult to apply to younger swimmers because all they see is how fast he turns over. So as coaches, we're sitting here and saying like, no, you gotta glide, you gotta get to the full extension, you gotta do all this stuff, and then they go watch Adam Peaty and they're like, well, he doesn't do. Yes, he does. He is just that good of an athlete that he is able to take what we are talking about and be able to turn it up to where he is getting to his full extension insanely aggressively and being able to cover the distance in the water that he's doing, but he's doing it incredibly fast. So the thing with breaststroke that is so challenging as a coach is that you see, and really it's not so much the case for the other 3 strokes, is you can watch world championships, NCAAs, the Olympics. You can watch a pool of 9 people, and all 9 of those people are going to have a completely different breaststroke. Like I said, with the other 3 strokes, you don't see that as drastically different, but with breaststroke, there's so many things that subtle differences with breaststroke that again depend on flexibility, depend on body type, body size. There's so many things in breaststroke that kind of run the gamut of different strokes, different techniques, all this different stuff. So what works for Adam Peaty may never work for me. it's so radically different from one person to the next. I mean, if Tyler, can you show that clip again?
Yeah.
I don't know specifically who the other gentlemen are in this race, but I mean, just looking at all these dudes, you know, you got this guy up here in the A Victor suit. He's got a way wider catch. You've got this guy down here on the bottom who is a little bit narrower, you know, so you've got, you know, just in this small clip, you've got a ton of different stuff. Look at this dude all the way down here on the bottom. That guy's probably, you know, I don't know, maybe the tallest dude in this group, and you know, he's got a completely different stroke than everybody else, which is, you know, a lot longer. Yeah, I mean, it's insane how you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in this heat, and they're all just insanely different.
So one thing I'm noticing is when they finish their kick, their heels aren't coming together. It's just, it looks like it's just their big toes.
It's their big toes. That's a little trick. I'm sure a few swimmers that I've been working with, I've kind of used that with. But yeah, that's something, you know, that a lot of swimmers make that mistake of. When they kick, they bring their legs like glued back together, and it doesn't need, I mean, even butterfly kick is not, you know, this this crazy tight leg, you know, legs glued together. You know, it's really kind of creating this, you know, your legs are kind of apart and they're really kind of pigeon toeing in to where it's like you got your big toes coming together, and it's kind of a whip there. And same thing with the breaststroke kick, is you're coming around and you're bringing your feet in, and then once you get to here and your big toes kind of finish, that movement kind of lifts your legs closer back to the surface and gives you that body position to balance back out again.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. So thank you for that, Court. All right. So, and just some final notes. This, you can, any of these strokes you can practice in front of the mirror. You can combine the actual motions, and visualize it, internalize it, and that way when you do get back into the water, you can work on mimicking those motions. Now, obviously, when you practice the kick, you practice one leg or the other, or you can sit in a chair and practice. But yeah, just get in front of a mirror and practice. Write down something that you learned and come back to it. Repetition is key. You know, the more you repeat, the more it becomes part of your muscle memory. And find a swimmer that you admire. Watch their videos on YouTube and study. Be a student of the sport. You know, you're not going to learn unless you're actively seeking this information, and ask questions. That's what Coach Courtney, Coach Damon, Coach Jennifer, Coach John, and I are here for. So Courtney, I want to thank you for participating in this swimming breaststroke breakdown, and thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Later.